What's up, everybody? Demon back. Welcome to a brand new video. This is the 10th episode of Godzilla-Thon. This one is going to be doing my review for 1967's Son of Godzilla. Now, this one is one of those ones that is very divided amongst the fan base. Some people love it, some people hate it, some people just really remain neutral on this movie because it is kind of odd. Me personally, as you guys might find out through this video, I'm one of the people that loves this movie, which is a very drastic change from last movie, my least favorite Godzilla movie ever. This one is one of the ones that I have a lot of nostalgia for, and I really like this movie. So, getting into this plot synopsis, this is going to be for the Japanese cut. We'll mention the English cut at the end. I have some different thoughts on the English cut that we'll get into, but getting into the Japanese cut, so there is the new Toho logo is first introduced in this movie. This logo is, I know it's been in most of their movies ever since this point on, but for me, it will always have a connection to Shin Godzilla just because that's, first of all, the only Toho movie that I've seen in theaters from Godzilla, or from any Toho movie that I've ever seen in theaters, and Shin Godzilla is also the one that I had the most connection to leading up to the release of the movie, so I was very connected to that, seeing that logo through all the trailers. It was, it's a pretty cool thing, so seeing it back here where it very first shows up is awesome. Originally, they had that old school Toho scope logo, which I prefer more. I think that's like a more classic logo, but I'm not going to get into the logos too much here. That's worthless knowledge for me. The movie starts with a plane in a storm, and it's having interference with its radars. Then they mention that it's brain waves, which doesn't make any sense at all. But the reason I mentioned brain waves being such a big point is because I mentioned it back, I think in the Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster review. I mentioned the fact that they keep bringing up brain waves for no reason. They just kind of bring them up. I think they do in multiple movies. They bring up brainwaves where it doesn't really make any sense, and now it's happening again where they mention brainwaves, and it's like never explained what is the brainwave that they're kind of going off of here. What do they think these brainwaves are? And that one, they're like, you're sending negative vibes with your brainwaves. You got to stop that. Back at the start of that movie. Now here they're like, Godzilla's brainwaves are throwing off our search patterns. It's really weird. I have no idea why. So, just kind of thought I'd mention that the brainwaves show back up. Godzilla shows up within this first, 2 seconds of the movie. He shows up. They find out that he's on his way to a small island. It's called Solgale Island. Later on, we'll find out what's going on there. So Godzilla's heading towards this island for no real reason. We just can't quite tell. And then they mention the fact that the interference is coming from Solgale Island. Once we cut to Solgale Island, we get some really lighthearted, upbeat, Gilligan's Island reminiscent music. We have lots of intro shots where there's great pictures of the island. Very tropical, pretty island. It reminds me so much of the end credits of Gilligan's Island. It's pretty insane. So if you guys have seen that show, shout out to Godzilla 154. He's the only person who got my Gilligan's Island reference and commented about it last video. I said in the description of last Godzilla-Thon, if you know what show I'm referring to, comment down below and I'll give you a shout out. He did, so he earned that shout out. There you go, man. Good job. Gilligan's Island's a great show. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's one of the best classic shows you'll ever see. Very reminiscent of that show's outro. I really feel like it's more reminiscent of the end credit sequence than the intro sequence. And then we see the science. There's a science investigation going down on this island. It's headed by Professor Kusami. He is a scientist. He's a very respected scientist. They refer to him as the Old Man, which is kind of funny because the actor is obviously not that old, but they refer to him as the Old Man. He's kind of like a hardened scientist. They say he's encouraged by failing, so he's just going to keep going for it, which is really great. And then him and our main character later on have a little interaction about that coming up. So we learn they've been on this island for a very long time. All of a sudden they're getting more brainwave or whatever. They're getting more of this interference with their systems. They're wondering what's going on. All of a sudden the radar kicks on. Something big is headed towards the island. They start to freak out a little bit, run outside, and then all of a sudden they just see this big huge plane fly over. They question whether it could be for the UN or what's what's going on. All of a sudden, a reporter, Goro Maki, is dropped out of there. Yes, that is Goro Maki from, not from Shin Godzilla, but the name was used in Shin Godzilla. Originally, this kind of took me by surprise, because originally, I knew that the character in Son of Godzilla's name was Goro, but I had forgotten that his full name was legit Goro Maki. So when I was watching this movie again the other day, they say his name, and I just was like, whoa, nice, I get that reference, that's a good one, went over my head. I thought that Goro, when everyone was like, oh, he has the same name as the guy from Son of Godzilla, I was like, well, yeah, sure, but Goro seems like it might be a common name in Japan. Plus, they've reused names in this series before. I really don't think the name Goro is that big of a deal. Goro Maki, though, they just took the straight name. They just took his. They just ripped the name right out of this movie. So that's pretty cool. So after a little bit of third grade styled pouting, Goro's welcomed onto the island. He becomes a main member there. He's not necessarily a scientist, but he's helping out with what he can because he's there. He's a journalist, a reporter. He's trying to find a good story on the island, and they let him stay because they can't really send him home. So he gets to kind of hang out on the island and help out. So at some point, a giant man-sized, like a 6-foot tall praying mantis just kind of wanders through the forest walking by their camp. Goro Maki is the only one who freaks out and is like, whoa, 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 what is that? And everyone else is just like, yeah, no, it's a big mantis. You've seen those before, as if it's like a totally normal thing. I guess in this world that makes sense. Godzilla's showing up, Ghidorah's showing up, all this crazy stuff's gone down. Of course they're not going to be that thrown off by one of these guys, but you know, they really seem to take everything just like for what it is throughout this whole movie. As we'll find out later when other giant monsters show up, they're not freaked out by it. They're not like, oh man, giant monsters on the same spot we're at, we're gonna die. They're more like, oh well, this kind of puts a little bit of a wrench in our plan. Well, that's a bummer. Guess we'll just move on. And they don't really question it, so it's kind of weird there. So we meet one of our scientists. I think his name's like Senchan in the English version, something like that. His name might be like Furukawa or something like this in the Japanese. I know they changed up a lot of the names. I didn't quite follow which names corresponded to which characters. I was, I get, when I'm trying to read the subtitles, write notes at the exact same time for Godzilla-Thon, it gets a little bit confusing here and there, especially when there's so many characters. This is a big cast of characters for this movie, so I kind of got lost in who each character was, like their names. They're all memorable characters. Like, I remember them, like, I see their faces, I remember which character they are, like, I know what their role in the movie is, but as for names, I don't quite remember hardly any of their names other than, of course, Goro Maki. And then we have one of our female characters. She's the only female character coming up. I know her name from the English cut, but not the Japanese cut, so we'll get there in a few minutes. So we meet this guy, Senchan or Furukawa, whatever his name is. He's a man who just he basically hates this island. He really wants to get off of it. He tries throughout the whole movie to try and convince everyone else to let him and everyone else off the island because he's done with this experiment. He just wants to go home. He kind of starts the movie out in a crazy place where he's just already on edge all the time. So then it makes complete sense when he kind of goes mad a little bit later in the movie, and that's also aided by the fact that he gets sick. So Goro leads out into the jungle to find some fresh food and veggies. He sees a mysterious girl swimming around. As he goes to take a picture of her, she disappears. It turns out the tests that are being ran on the island by these scientists are to control the weather. They're trying to make all land on Earth fertile land so that there will be no food shortage in the near future. Really cool plan. I mean, it makes sense from a scientific standpoint. If you can turn these climates into climates that will be able to support life and food, then there you go. There is going to be no food shortage. So it's a good plan. It just kind of falls apart here once they run the second test. So the first test is ran. The cooling test, it works as planned, but then they try to reheat the island. This one fails. They lose control of the weather balloon that they send up there. They don't have the proper, they lose signal to it basically, and it explodes. I think at too low of a temperature, or at too low of an altitude, they say it explodes. Creates a nuclear storm up in the sky. This triggers intense heat at the same time as a typhoon. So there's this kind of opposite reaction going on here where the rain is coming down, but it's so hot that the rain is disintegrating right as it hits the ground. It just evaporates immediately. It's a really cool effect scene. I really like the effects in this movie. Is great. So this whole storm's going on, then the intense heat kind of takes over the island. Everyone's really, really hot. They're at the point of nearly They're at the point of basically like heat sickness where it's too much, they can't take it. Due to the radiation from the test, the giant mantis grew to Godzilla's size. There's some really good special effects as these giant mantises, giant mantis, what do they call them? Gigantus in the English cut, aka Kamacuras. There's really great scenes as Kamacuras chases around our characters. So, like, the effects in this movie, like I said, most of the time they are spot on. They are really good, especially for the year 1967. They are amazing. Keep in mind, this is Japan we're talking about. So, they do a really great job with the special effects. Really good. It's revealed there are 3 Gigantuses or Kamacuras. They're all headed to this random hill. They start knocking down the hill. They undig this big old egg. The radio that they were going to originally call home on, the scientists were originally going to call home on and basically get a pickup from, it's been destroyed. I believe one of our characters, who's played by Akihiko Hirata, I think he plays him. So, this character, he kind of breaks the radio, and then he has to spend the rest of the movie trying to fix it. So, the radio is, regardless of what broke it, the radio is broken, so they can't radio home and get off this island when the tests have all gone bad. Plus, the professor wants to continue the investigation and continue the experiments. There's just now giant monsters there. So this mysterious girl shows up. She steals the men's clothes, and she runs off into the jungle. And then they're all confused, like, "Whoa, there is a woman here." Because there's this ongoing debate throughout the movie of, is Goro seeing a girl or not? Because all the characters don't believe him. We clearly, the audience, we know that he is seeing this girl, but everyone else is like, "Nah, there's no girl here. We mapped the island, and we know for a fact." Even though, we clearly have seen her, and Goro's seen her. I don't know why they wouldn't believe him. They're like, "You're hallucinating." Then they changed the "you're hallucinating" line in the English cut to make it even more ridiculous, where he's like, "I don't believe in ghosts either." So, there's some weird stuff here where it's like they should believe him, but they don't. It's kind of, it's a little bit of forced conflict here. But eventually she shows up. They see her. One of them tries to shoot her. Sunshine, I think, tries to shoot her, and then she gets away. It's actually only at this point in the movie that Goro names the giant mantises Kamacuras. So then the Kamacuras break open this egg, revealing baby Godzilla on the inside. They plan to eat him. Minya, they don't actually give him the name Minya in this movie, but the character is called Minya, so I'm going to refer to him as that. Minya looks absolutely terrible through this movie, especially right as he hatches. They use a different puppet than the suit throughout the movie. He looks god-awful. I'm so glad that they changed the design. They somewhat switch it up towards the end of this movie, and then I believe they give him a bit more of an updated design in Destroy All Monsters and Godzilla's Revenge. But I could be wrong. It might just be the same suit. God, it's so terrible. I hate looking at it. He looks really ugly. He looks really creepy. Like, any little kid would be terrified of this. As a little kid, I'm sure I was, like, I'm talking like a really little kid, not like a 7-year-old, but like a really little, like a 2-year-old or 3-year-old. I'm sure I was probably scared of this because he looks terrifying in some shots. Like, he looks like a freaky guy. So, whoever designed this and was trying to go for the cute factor, they failed at their job. Anyways, Minya, he just looks absolutely terrible. I hate the design. Most people do. Everyone else, everyone in the world pretty much agrees that the only good Godzilla Sun design that they ever came up with was in the Heisei series. But we'll get there. In a long time we'll get there. Quite a few months, actually, I'm sure. It would have to be a few months to get there. So, Minya looks awful. Then Furukawa, or whatever his name is, Sanchan, goes crazy, running off and screaming. Godzilla makes landfall as he's trying to run into the ocean. Godzilla stomps through the science lab. He basically destroys everything. I've never had a problem with Godzilla's design in this movie until I watched it this time. So, Godzilla's head looks too compacted. A lot of people make jokes saying he looks like a frog. I always thought, yeah, sure, he looks a bit more froggish than he usually does. He usually looks more dinosaurian and crocodilian. But in this movie, he looks very frog-like, and it kind of is odd. So, Godzilla in this movie, I don't like the design. I've never had a problem with the design until I watched the movie this time around. Usually I was just like, yeah, people over-exaggerate. It's not that bad. This time I watched it and I was like, hey, it actually, to be honest, it kind of is that bad. It's not a good design. Really glad they changed it because the design we get after this, I love that design. We'll get there. Next movie, Destroy All Monsters, is going to be great. Love that movie. So, Anyways, Godzilla's design is pretty stupid. He shows up, he stomps his way through the scientific lab. It's a short destruction scene, but it's a cool one. Sadly, it's short because we don't really get any other destruction scenes from Godzilla. He kind of just sleeps through most of the rest of the movie, which is disappointing. So Godzilla heads off towards his adopted son. Yes, Minya is adopted. If you want to know more on my thoughts on this, there is a video if you want the explanation. If you're like, no, he's not. He's obviously Godzilla's son. Go watch the video in the channel, Is Minya Adopted? It's kind of a parody video, but it is true. It's true points in that video. So Godzilla kills the Kamacuras in defense of Minya, and then he takes off. He leaves Minya there alone. Goro meets Seiko, I don't know what her name is in the Japanese cut, but in the English cut, it's Reiko, so I'm going to call her Reiko because that's the one I'm familiar with. So, because I don't know if I mentioned this at the start or not, this is my first time watching the Japanese cut, which is why I'm familiar with the names like Spaiga, Gimantis, Reiko. I'm not quite familiar with the Japanese names at all. So, Reiko just she's feeding Godzilla's son. She has like a nice relationship with him until Godzilla shows up and then she runs off. She goes into her cage where Goro is. He's knocked out and then she throws a knife at him and he kind of knocks some sense into her. He doesn't hit her or anything like that. I was going to say he kind of knocks her out, but that doesn't happen. He knocks some sense into her, gets her to stop, gets her back to the main camp and shows everyone, introduces her to everyone so that they can all be friends. Kamacuras attacks the people at the science base. It's a really cool scene where they're all shooting at him and he's there. I don't remember this scene in the English cut. It might be in the English cut. It's been about a year since I've seen the English cut. I was going to watch it again, but I kind of ran out of time and I just had time to see the Japanese cut. I know the English cut is cut a little bit differently than this cut, so this part might have come at a different point if it came at all. I just don't remember this scene at all. When I was watching this movie, it took me by surprise because I did not remember this scene where Kamacuras, one of them who got away from the Godzilla attack because the other two are dead, he winds up attacking the humans at their science lab and he flies away and that's how it goes. So then all our crew, other than I think 4 characters, Reiko, our 2 main scientists, and Goro, everyone else falls under this sickness, so they have to go retrieve some. It's weird. It's like a red-hot burning. It's literally red. It is a red-hot burning sort of water that is right next to where Godzilla and Minya are hanging out, where they're sleeping. Minya's doing some jump rope. And then Kumonga's also in the area, but we don't get to see him for a while. They just mention the fact that he's there. So Minya's doing some jump rope with Godzilla's tail. He's hopping over it. He keeps tripping on it. It's a goofy little scene. I loved that when I was a kid. Currently, it's what it is. Godzilla, he teaches Minya how to use the atomic breath. This is a great sequence no matter what age you are because it's great to see Minya get hurt because he's just gross looking. So Godzilla's trying to teach Minya how to use the atomic breath. He blasts it once. Minya freaks out, which is, it's sad. The characterization of Minya in this movie, it could have been something BA where it could have been like, oh, this is the next Godzilla? Ooh, the world is screwed. He is awesome. But instead, they went for a much more sympathetic type character where he's a wimp, he's a coward, he's definitely a coward as the whole point of Godzilla's revenge. But, even though destroy all monsters, he's not. But we'll get there. So, in this movie, he's a coward, until the very end. So he freaks out by Godzilla's atomic breath. Godzilla tries to get him to do it. He can only puff some smoke rings. Godzilla stamps on his tail, and then he breathes the atomic breath. Then Godzilla goes back to sleep, and he breathes the atomic breath again without any assistance. He kind of turns around like, did you see that? And Godzilla's asleep, and he's like, god dang it. So then he goes back to bed with Godzilla. It's a cute scene when he's holding his arm. So that's nice. They wind up retrieving the red liquid and getting it back to our crew. Kumonga's not woken up despite multiple scares thinking that he would be. Our crew actually winds up being healed by this liquid. It winds up curing their sickness, so there you go. Furukawa, or whatever his name is, Senchan, I don't know what his name is. You guys could tell I keep messing it up. The red liquid is given to our scientists and it cures them. They are done with their sickness and they can now be back to being productive and, helpful. So after this, Kamacuras attacks Minya. The final Kamacuras attacks Minya. It's kind of a weird fight. Nothing really goes down in it. Kamacuras just kind of smacks Minya around for a little bit. Minya falls over, knocking over some rocks. The fight wakes up Kumonga. The rocks wake up Kumonga. contact rescue after the radio is fixed, and then they decide to implement a new freezing plan. Minya is caught in Kumonga's web when Godzilla shows up finally after the freezing test is began. They fire off the weather balloon, it explodes, the freezing test starts. Godzilla wakes up, shows up at this fight. Kamacuras winds up being there. Kumonga winds up killing Kamacuras, webbing up Minya, and is about to kill Minya when Godzilla shows up, saves them. Godzilla and Minya tag team Kumonga. So you'd think that Kumonga would have, he'd have no chance, and Godzilla and Minya would destroy him really easily, which is my biggest problem with Godzilla in this movie, is that we've seen Godzilla do amazing, really awesome things throughout the whole series up till this point. He has taken on Ghidorah, he has taken on King Kong, he has done all this stuff and had very little problems. Well, I mean, he did lose to Kong and Mothra, but other than that, he has a pretty good track record in this series at this point. And then all of a sudden, these monsters kind of hold him back, and they're able to hold their own, unless it's explained that, which it isn't, and it never will be, but unless it was Godzilla was pulling his punches to try and teach Minya that it was you gotta pull your punches sometimes. But that is clearly not the case. Godzilla's just kind of not having as easy of a time fighting these monsters as he should, which does not make any sense, and I don't understand why. He should have easily wiped out Ebra last movie. He should have easily wiped out the Kamacuras in this movie. Well, he did. He easily wiped out Kamacuras in this movie. But then Kumonga shows up, and all of a sudden, it's like an even fight. It doesn't make any sense, especially because Minya and Godzilla tag team Kumonga. Minya even has the atomic breath throughout this sequence, which doesn't make any sense because you'd think the two of them would kill him so easily, but they don't. I don't know, as a little kid I always just took it as spiders are scary to humans and they're that small. Could you imagine a human-sized spider? A human would definitely be so afraid of that thing that they would most likely lose just out of fear. So as a little kid, I always justified it like that, as Godzilla and Minya were probably just afraid of this spider because people are afraid of spiders, and so therefore they were going to lose because of fear. Doesn't make any sense. I know, it was a little kid logic, so you just have to go with it sometimes. Now looking back on it, it's just cheap writing to try and get some conflict in there. I think it would have been cooler if we had a more formidable foe for Godzilla to fight, or if Minya had to fight him all by himself and Minya wind up winning while Godzilla was out fighting some other monster. I think it would be cool if two fights were happening simultaneously. If all of a sudden a swarm of Kamacuras attack Godzilla, he's busy with that, trying to just wipe them all out one by one. And then Minya has to take on Kumonga on his own, and he winds up winning. I think that would be a much more convincing sequence. It'd give Minya's story arc a lot of weight, because then Minya would be taken from a coward into an awesome character, whereas in this movie his arc is a coward to a guy that helped fight with Godzilla but still got his butt kicked to, the end scene, which is a really touching scene considering it's two people in rubber monster suits or latex or whatever you're going to go with. It's a really touching scene. We'll get there. I love that scene. So, the weather plan goes into full effect. It starts snowing on this fight with Godzilla and Kumonga. They're getting covered in snow. Then all of a sudden Godzilla uses the atomic breath during this really freezing weather where it's snowing on the island. Uses the atomic breath, and all of a sudden, now of all times, it sets Kumonga on fire. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It'd make more sense if the fire was started beforehand, and then I don't know. And then so the test works on the island. Snow is going on. Our human characters head out on a raft, are picked up by a submarine. They survive the events of the movie. It's a happy ending for them. But Godzilla and Minya are stuck on this island. It looks like Minya's going to freeze to death. He falls over. This is the touching scene. He falls over. He looks like he's going to freeze to death. Godzilla's just walking away. He doesn't really care. And then you find out that deep down he does, because Godzilla turns back around, walks over, and holds Minya until they're covered in snow. It is revealed that they are going to be hibernating until the snow melts, which apparently isn't that long because they show back up for... Technically only Godzilla would show back up after this for a long time, so maybe Minya's stuck frozen there up until the events of Destroy All Monsters, but technically they show back up for, Godzilla shows back up for Hedorah in a couple years, because Godzilla's revenge does not take place in this continuity, and Destroy All Monsters takes place in the future of all the other movies. So I guess I've been talking about Destroy All Monsters and the other movies a lot this video. That's because this movie really is it is a good movie, but it kind of fails compared to the ones that follow it because and the ones that come before it. This movie is in one of those weird places where I feel like we get a block of three kind of odd bad Godzilla movies where we get obviously, I hate Godzilla vs. Sea Monster. That's an awful movie. And, you know, people defended it in the comments last video. I thank you for that because I'm always open to hear multiple opinions just as long as you're polite, which you guys were. So I thank you for that. I understand where a lot of people are coming from with that movie where they're like, it's a cool jungle-theme movie, James Bond-esque plot. But here's the problem is, first of all, if I want a jungle-themed Godzilla movie, I'm going to watch Son of Godzilla. If I want a James Bond Godzilla movie, I'm watching Mechagodzilla all the way. I don't want to see the 2-in-1 movie because I honestly, as you guys could tell, I hate that movie. I hate Godzilla vs. Sea Monster. I think there's other movies that do that stuff better. Jungle, Island, Tropical movie, that's the Son of Godzilla is your go-to for that one, in my opinion. It's a great movie, really good for kids. It's a good kid movie. I feel like if I watched this with my little brother, he would have gotten a kick out of it. It's a fun movie for kids. I loved it as a little kid, which is my personal connection to it, why I like it so much. And I specifically like the English cut. I like the English cut a lot better than the Japanese cut. I don't know, it feels a lot more fast-paced. I feel like it must be cut differently, because when I was watching this movie with the Japanese subs, I felt like it was dragging quite a bit, whereas when I watch the English cut, I'm constantly entertained, and it just feels a lot more fun to me. It could be the voice acting is just a lot more goofy. I don't quite know. I just have a lot more fun with the English cut, and I honestly think that it has to be cut differently, because there's scenes that I remember happening in a different order from the English cut. There's also scenes that I don't remember being in the English cut that are in the Japanese cut, but I won't really know up until probably tonight after Godzilla-Thon. When I'm going to sleep, I'll pop in the English cut of Son of Godzilla, which is, I planned to do it before this, but I just didn't have the time to get this one up in time and still be able to do the video on this week and also be able to watch the movie. So I ran out of time. I didn't time manage very well. I'll be sure to watch Destroy All Monsters beforehand. Plus, I only have the English cut of that one, so it'll go by a lot faster. And I really love that movie, even the human stuff, which a lot of people don't. I got to stop talking about that movie. It's you know, we'll get there. We'll get there next week. So there you go. The human plot of this movie... Oh, I gotta go back to that thought that I totally abandoned. So, this is kind of in a weird block of Godzilla movies that aren't great, but aren't bad, where I feel like what happens is we go from the original 1954, amazing, go to Godzilla Raids Again, which is a huge dip. That movie's awful. Then we go to, and if you guys want to know why I think that movie's awful, it's not necessarily an awful movie. It's a cool premise and everything like that. The execution wasn't that great, and it was the movie that came before is just so good that it really failed in comparison. Anyways, the 54 movie's great. Godzilla Raids Again is terrible in my opinion. Then we get King Kong vs. Godzilla, my favorite movie of all times. Mothra vs. Godzilla is one of my favorite movies of all times. It's really amazing. Ghidorah is a great one. Then we get Invasion of the Astro Monster is awesome. And then we take a huge dive with Sea Monster, and then we get Son of Godzilla. Personally, I like it. You know, I like the campy Godzilla movies, not on the same level as the horror Godzilla movies or the serious ones, but I like the campy ones because it gives me a lot of a childhood feel for me. It takes me back to being really young, and I love that. I loved this movie as a little kid. I still love it now, especially because of that connection I have to it. And then after this, we get one of my favorite Godzilla movies, Destroy All Monsters, followed by another block of 2 crappy movies. I know I said a block of 3 crappy movies. It's because I forgot about Destroy All Monsters coming in between Godzilla's Revenge and this movie. So there's only a block of 2. So we kind of go from, and I know I'm rambling here, I get it, but we go from a block of good ones from King Kong vs. Godzilla to Invasion of the Astro Monster. We take a dive here with these 2, which is Sea Monster is terrible. And then we go a little bit up out of that dive with this one. Personally, I like it just because it's so fun. Then we take a huge incline with Destroy All Monsters. We'll get there. And then we go back somewhat down with Revenge. A lot of people hate that movie. I don't. I really like that movie. We go way down with Hedorah. I still hate that movie. I know it's made a comeback in the Godzilla community recently. I still hate it. And then we go up from there, and then the series pretty much just is on an upward rise for a while. So, I know I'm kind of giving away my thoughts on the rest of the Godzilla series here, but whatever. It's fine. It's my review. I can do what I want. I can ramble if I want to. So the human plot in this movie is alright. It is not bad. It is, it's not the best one. These characters aren't like your best Godzilla characters, but it's a pretty fun plot. It's a entertaining movie, and these human characters really help that. They don't feel terrible, they don't feel boring or anything like that. They feel fun, and I really like that. This movie is just, the best way to describe it is goofy fun, whereas King Kong vs. Godzilla is just awesome and fun, which I said, this movie's fun a lot in that movie, in that review, but this one is a different type of fun. It's goofy fun, and I really enjoy that. The monster stuff is the same way. I mean, the effects are really good, except for the suits. Godzilla and Minya look so dumb in this movie. I get it, they try to bulk up Godzilla to make him look physically bigger than Minya, but in doing that, they also sacrificed Godzilla's awesomeness, and they kind of made him look really dumb. And like I said, I never had a problem with this design up until watching it this time, so that was interesting. Anyways, the monster stuff is pretty good. The monster fighting is awesome, and then, except for the fact that, for whatever reason, Kumonga is able to hold his own. And then, the only thing that I don't like is the fact that Godzilla really does fall asleep through a large portion of this movie. And it's not like in a interesting Shin Godzilla way when he goes into shutdown in the middle of the city. This one's like in a, I'm going to take a nap here on this rock for over 30 minutes of the movie kind of way, which is pretty dumb. Overall, like I keep saying, it's a pretty fun movie. I enjoy this movie a lot. Very goofy. Don't go watch this if you're looking for a serious Godzilla movie. If you're trying to introduce someone to Godzilla, unless they're a little kid, don't show them this one. Show them some other Godzilla movie like Mothra vs. Godzilla and King Kong vs. Godzilla, depending on which version you're watching. I'm going to say English cut for that movie. And then the original 54, obviously, is a go-to for introducing people to Godzilla. They really need to see that one to know where it all starts. The English cut, like I keep saying, is better than the Japanese cut in my opinion. The music is not great, but it is upbeat, and I do love it. So, I know I just said it's not great, but I also love it. So, it's a contradiction, I know. Anyways, here's the thing, is with this music, it's not like awesome music. It's not like you're going to go to it like an Ifukube score and just listen to it, I listen to Godzilla music almost non-stop. But with this music, when I listen to it, and I don't listen to it often, which is what helps, it gets me in a good mood. It gets me happy because it is an upbeat score, and it is, like I keep saying, it's very energetic, very fun. So the music is not great. It's not on the level of Ifukube, and Masaru Sato does this score as well. He does better in the next couple movies he does. So I really love his work in Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. That's going to be a long ways down the line, a few weeks from now, so, just wait for that one. The effects in this movie are pretty decent, except sometimes the wires are exposed, which is often the problem. I think on Kumonga it's most noticeable when you see all the wires puppeteering his legs. Kamacuras I don't really have a problem with. I never see that. Godzilla's tail, I don't really ever see that. Minya's first form, I think you see it, and I know I just said first form as if he, evolves like Shin Godzilla, but Minya's first design in the movie, he doesn't really, I don't think a human sat in that suit. It looks like a little puppet that they kind of dragged along. I think there's a couple shots when you see some wires operating that little guy, and then once he gets into the normal Minya that's played by that little dwarf guy. And yeah, I'm allowed to say dwarf because that was part of his name, was something, the dwarf was the actor's name, it was his stage name, so I'm allowed to say that. If anyone's like, oh, that's offensive, no, it's not. So, the English cut, I would give it overall an 8.5 out of 10. I think it's like I keep saying, an upbeat, happy movie. It is one of those movies that just takes me on a nostalgia fest pretty much, especially the English cut. So I didn't really have that connection with the Japanese cut, which is one of the other reasons why I found myself more bored watching the Japanese cut than I expected. Other than that, I would give probably a 7.5 to 8 to the Japanese cut, because although I don't think it's as good as the English cut, I still do think this is a pretty fun movie, whereas a lot of people rate this one as a low score, where they're like, I don't like this movie, it's too cheesy and I don't like it. I appreciate the campy factor. I think it goes a little bit overboard in some movies, Hedorah, but I do appreciate it in this movie, and I really like the upbeat Gilligan's Island feel to this movie. It makes it very different from the other ones in the series. This is also one of the first ones where we get some real hard character development for Godzilla, taking him from the villain that he was, and then he turned into more of an anti-hero up until this point when he starts, keep in mind starts, he doesn't ever complete it in this movie. I really don't know. I feel like he probably would ever complete it in all the way in Hedorah, so it's going to take another 2 movies for him to finally get to that point of being a straight superhero. Obviously, he's a straight superhero in that movie. I'm trying to think, though, if they characterize him as a superhero in Godzilla's Revenge, which I don't think they do, because if I remember, there's a point when he chases around Ichiro. Anyways, guys, this is when Godzilla's characterization is shifted more towards the superhero factor of him going from more evil to, in this movie, he messes stuff up on accident. He doesn't mean to walk through that science laboratory. He just does on accident. He's on his way to save his son. And then he kind of helps out through the rest of this movie. He shows up and kicks some butt. And then his characterization goes from being cold-hearted to a loving father at the end of this movie. And even though Minnie is adopted, he becomes a loving father by the end of this movie. And then from there, I think because he has that human trait of love and affection, and he can care about something, I think from that point on is what kind of really gets the gears moving to get him into that superhero form that we really love him in. If I'm remembering correctly, I think it was Adam Noyce of Ant Productions did an amazing video characterization of Showa Godzilla, and I've listened to that one multiple times, and I know I have to think about it, but it's been a while since I've seen it. If it was him who did this video, it's a really good video. Go check it out. He basically breaks down Godzilla's characterization from villain to hero in the Showa series. Go check that one out. If it is him, then you'll be hearing this, because if it's not him, I'll edit this out of the video. If it is him, go down, link below, check out that video. It was a great video, and Adam, if you're watching this, good job on that. I love all your Godzilla videos, and I love most of your videos, so keep up the good work, man. And that's pretty much it for today, 10th episode of Godzilla-Thon. This one felt a lot more rambly than I wanted it to. It's just because I was really unfamiliar with this version of the movie, so kind of took me off guard, and then I went straight into doing this Godzilla-Thon after filming Never Cloudy in Colorado, so it's been a busy day. So anyways, guys, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. D-Man, out.